Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. As you guys may know, we are from the Ahmadiyya Muslim Students Association here at the University of Windsor. So a tradition of our events is that we start with the recitation of the Holy Quran. So I'd like to request Akil Bhatt to do the recitation for us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله يبسط الرزق لمن يشاء ويقدر وفرحوا بالحياة الدنيا وما الحياة الدنيا في الآخرة إلا متاع. ويقول الذين كفروا لولا أنزل عليه آية من ربه قل إن الله يضل من يشاء ويهدي إليه من أناب. الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب. الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات طوبى لهم وحسن مآب. I have just recited verses 27 to 31 from chapter 13 of the Holy Quran before you. Their translation is as follows. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the rejected. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, ever merciful. Allah enlarges His provision or straightens it for whomsoever He pleases. They are content with the hither life, whereas the hither life is but a temporary provision, in contrast with that with which is to come. Those who disbelieve ask, why is not a sign sent down to him by his Lord? Tell them, Allah lets go astray those whom He wills, and guides to Himself those who turn to Him. Those who believe and whose hearts find comfort in the remembrance of Allah, it is only in the remembrance of Allah that hearts can find comfort. Those who believe and act righteously shall have happiness and an excellent retreat. Thank you, Akil. Okay, so as someone who is non-indigenous to this land, I am obliged to acknowledge that the University of Windsor sits on the traditional territory of Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. We respect the long-standing relationships with First Nations peoples in the 100-mile Windsor-Essex Peninsula and the Straits of Detroit. I just want to mention here that let's not let this just be a thing that we just say. Let's take a moment and make sure that we reflect on this and what it truly means. So I will tell you guys a bit about Amsa. So you can see these 4 pictures in the back. These are the symposiums that we held last year, and we are instructed from our department to hold these types of events every semester, or at least every year, to kind of get the community together and discuss topics of relevance and kind of promote interfaith dialogue. So about Amsa, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Students Association is the student body of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community at large, which is a dynamic Muslim community that was founded in 1889 by who we believe is the promised Messiah alayhi salam, foretold by many of the major world religions. He said that I would like to draw the attention of my friends to an important matter, that one of the reasons why this minaret was built was so that a room therein be built, wherein at least 100 people can be seated, and this room be used for admonishments and religious lectures, because I intend that a convention of religious dialogues be organized in Qadian once or twice a year. In that convention, every person from the Muslims, the Hindus, the Aryas, the Christians, and the Sikhs would present the beautiful teachings of their faith. But there will be one condition, and that is that no one will attack any other faith in any way, but merely state the points in favor of his own faith in a dignified manner. So this is kind of the sum of what we are here to do today. We are trying to engage in a dignified manner. And mind you, this prophecy was made in Qadian, which is probably less than 1/10 of the size of Windsor. And now we are here to kind of fulfill those words. And that is a bit about Amsa. We also host these events around the country. So if you go anywhere else and you're looking for such dialogues, you can look to your local Amsa, and I'm sure you'll find something. So now I would like to invite Akil Butt again. He will be your moderator for the night, so please be nice to him. All right, thank you very much, Ibrahim. I would also like to. That wasn't supposed to happen. All right, an icebreaker, perfect. So now that we have that out of the way, I would just like to start with a couple of just housekeeping things. As you can see, there are a few emergency exits. So to your right side, there are about 5 exits. And at the back of the hall as well, there is an exit as well. I'm sure our panelists are going to keep us refreshed and energized. But if you do feel a bit dehydrated, need some water, there's also some water at the back. So you can feel free to get up at any moment, grab some water, or to stretch out your legs. So without any further ado, we have a great panel of speakers today, and they've taken out time to present their ideas and the teachings from their respective faiths. And so let's get started. The order of the speakers today is going to be, first we'll be listening to the 6th speaker, from the Sikh perspective, then from the Hindu perspective, then the atheist perspective, followed by the Jewish, Christian, and finally the Muslim perspective. So getting right into it, I will introduce our sixth speaker for tonight, Triman Singh. He is a practicing Sikh and has regularly attended youth camps, conferences, and has organized multiple community events for the Sikh youth here in Windsor and the US and Canada. He just graduated from the University of Waterloo and is a software engineer by profession. He was an executive at the Sikh Student Association while he was at the University of Waterloo, and he gave lectures and interactive workshops, as well as organized other events while he was involved there. He continues to be active in the Sikh youth spaces, and he hopes to serve his community for years to come. So I would like to now invite Triman Singh.
In the slides, I can just press. Perfect. Okay, so before starting, I'm going to start off with the Sikh greeting. For those of you that know it, please say it with me. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So before starting this topic, just want to say, even though I went to the University of Waterloo, I was born in Michigan, but I was raised in Windsor. I've lived here my whole life. Went to Massey and went to Waterloo to pursue education. And now I wanted to be a software engineer, but I'm kind of doing something in between hardware and software now. I'm a semiconductor engineer, so those of you who want to talk about that later, we can talk about that. But just to start off, the pursuit of happiness, I think it's such a great topic, something that, I think happiness is something that everyone is working towards. But I think the way that we define it, the way that we look at it, I think that's what really, sort of emphasizes what kind of happiness we want in our life. So from the Sikh perspective, defining what happiness is, defining what kind of happiness, what's temporary happiness, what is, everlasting happiness. So one of the phrases, one of the quotes, one of the shabads, the way that we say in our language, in Guru Granth Sahib says, "Eet oot nahi bichhada, so sangi ganiya, binas jaye jo nimk main, so alap sukh baniya." So eet oot, meaning the happiness that doesn't stay with you, or the person or the thing that doesn't stay with you here and hereafter, or that stays with you, here and hereafter, that thing is truly your friend. And binas jaye jo nimk main, something that leaves you in one instant, so alap sukh, is a very temporary happiness. And when we look at who to fall for happiness, one of the quotes in Guru Granth Sahib, which we believe is our living and everlasting Guru, is "Jis manukh pe karo benati, so apna dukh pareya." That if you rely on a simple human being for your support, that human being is filled with their own suffering, their own pain. And everyone, apne hi sukh syon jag fande ho, o kahu ko nahi. Everyone is worried about their own happiness, and not worried about everyone else. And then even going further, sukh mein aan bahut mil baithat, rahat chaho dis kera, bipt pari sab hi sang chhadat, kau na avat nera. So when happiness, or when there's happiness in your lives, everyone is around you. But the moment pain and suffering comes, very few, or actually everyone, leaves you. And this is where, defining what happiness is for us, comes in. And in one of our daily prayers, Rara Sahib, right at the beginning, a quote comes, Dukh daru sukh rog paya. That dukh is actually the medicine and sukh, happiness, is the disease. Because in this world, what reminds us of the Creator is usually suffering or pain. And what is true happiness and what is true suffering? What is constant happiness? What is constant suffering? What is, and who defines this for us? And for us, the Guru defines this for us. Forgetting the Creator is the greatest, is constant suffering, and remembering and constantly remembering the Creator is constant and forever happiness, and is the true happiness. Tiski sharni parmana, jis jevad avarna koe, jis simrat sukh hoye kana, dukh dard na mule hoye. Though in whose remembrance sukh is constant, happiness is overflowing, is unending, and dukh can never come, suffering can never come close to you. So, and this is, reinvigorated again and again in our scriptures, in Guru Granth Sahib. Ik til pyara visra. The moment you forget the Creator, dukh lagay sukh jaye. That suffering comes and happiness goes away. And even further than that, in our scripture it says, Vin tod hor je mangana, sir dukhan ke dukh. That if I ask for anything but you, the Creator, it is asking for the greatest sufferings of all suffering. De naam santokhiya, give me your name. And for us, naam, which is a unending topic in Sikhi, is basically the identification within this world that we use for the Creator. Uttara man ki pukh, gur vanten harya kitya nanak kya manukh. And then even further, whatever the stuff that we look at in today's world that gives us happiness, the Guru describes it in just 4 lines. Sukh nahi bahte tan khate, sukh nahi pekhe nirt nate, sukh nahi bahut desh kamaye, sarb sukhan har har gun gaye. So collecting wealth will never give you happiness. Watching people, imitate others, movies or plays will not give you happiness. Sukh nahi bahut desh kamaye, collecting lands or, creating property will not give you happiness. Sarb sukha, that everlasting happiness or all the happinesses in the world comes in praising the Creator. And then it even goes beyond, which is talking about the temporary happiness and the temporary suffering or pain that we go through in this world. That, the way that we look at it from the Sikh perspective is, Je sukh de ta tujhe arati. If you give us happiness, then we remember you. Dukh pi tujhe te ai. That we remember you even in suffering. Je bhukh de, if you keep us hungry, ta it hi raja, then we accept it as is. Dukh vich sukh manai. That even in suffering we celebrate this as a happiness. And when this definition, and the biggest thing is to look at suffering or temporary happiness and temporary suffering as the same in this world. They're like, clothes that we wear. It's always going to come and go. Sukh ko mangay sabko, dukh na mangay koe. Sukha ko dukh agla. That as soon as there's happiness, there's suffering right around the corner. Manmukh booj na hoye. Sukh dukh sam kar janiye. That look at these temporary happiness, this temporary suffering as the same, because it's all a part of the will of the Creator, the hukam, which we call in Sikhi. Shabad ped sukh hoye. So when we talk about hukam, one of the lines that kind of makes us think about this even deeper is if we are happy in whatever the Creator is willing, then there's no such thing as dukh and sukh for us. And one of the lines in the final sloks of the ninth Guru of the sixth Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib's, he writes, Jatan bahut sukh ke kiye, that you make many efforts for happiness, dukh ko kiyo na koi, but you don't make any effort for dukh or suffering. Kaho nanak sun re mana har bhav so hoy, that regardless of these two things, whatever the Creator wills is going to happen. So once you realize the Creator's will, then this suffering ends. Jira agan barabar tapੈ, bhitar vagੈ ਘਾਤੀ, pranvat nanak hukum pachana, that realizing the will of the Creator, sukh hovੈ din rati, that day and night you will be in happiness. And then in this remembrance, because you're seeing the worldly and temporary happiness as the same, and this comes in many, there's a shabad again by the ninth Guru, Jo nar dukh mein dukh nahi manna, that being that doesn't believe suffering is happening when there's, suffering happening around them, sukh sane arpੈ nahi janke, is not attached to the worldly happiness or temporary happiness, and is not afraid of anything, kanchan mati manna, and sees gold and dirt as the same thing. So looking at the world with that lens, that all the temporary happinesses, all the happiness and suffering in the world is very temporary, and constant happiness only comes from the remembrance of the Creator. And that means that also is the remembrance, the will, and the service of the Creator are all intertwined. So we do all three of them in unison, and which is why it tan lagੈ ਬਾਣੀਆਂ, sukh hovੈ sev ਕਮਾਣੀਆਂ, sab duniya avan ਜਾਣੀਆਂ. So only in service of the Creator we find happiness, and because of that, ਵਿੱਚ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਸੇਵ ਕਮਾਈਐ, ਤਾਂ ਦਰਗਾਹ ਬੈਸਣ ਪਾਈਐ, ਕਹੋ ਨਾਨਕ ਬਾਂਹ ਲੁਡਾਈਐ. That within the creation, because we believe the Creator is within every single atom of the creation, serving the creation holistically, the environment, humankind, mankind, animals, all the way, whatever we can do is true service of the creation. And in true remembrance, when you're remembering the Creator, you're also remembering the Creator's creation. And for us, this experience is not just, I talked about hukam, but this experience for us is highlighted within the Sikh experience itself. So two of the Sikh Gurus, and if you look at the experience of the Sikh Gurus, it's nothing but worldly suffering, especially in certain chapters of their lives. So when the fifth Guru of the Sikhs, Guru Arjan Dev Ji, and just for your information, the Sikhs have 10 Gurus that lived from 1469 to 1708, and then after that, since 1708, we have our holy scripture, Guru Granth Sahib, as our living and everlasting Guru. And so the fifth Guru was actually persecuted at the time by the emperor of the time. And during that, the way that Sikhs actually remember it, and we actually believe that in the remembrance of the Creator, worldly suffering and happiness actually is nothing. And you actually don't feel even physical pain or mental pain at all. And the way we remember the way that Guru Arjan Dev Ji became a shaheed or was martyred, Bhai Gurdas Ji writes it very beautifully. Rende gur dariyao vich, meen kuleen het nirbani. That the Guru is submersed in the remembrance of the Creator. And because of that, peed pai chit avarna ani, that even though he's going through suffering, there's nothing else that's distracting the Creator's focus. Shabad surkt live mirg jion, peed pai chit avarna ani, darshan dekh patang jion. And because the Guru was literally burned alive, and the way that Guru Arjan Dev Ji, our fifth Guru, was persecuted was first he was boiled alive in a boiling pot, and then he was made to sit on a tatti tavi. The way I can explain it is like a hot stove, and hot sand was poured onto his head. And then at the end of it all, after all the suffering that he went to, he was thrown into a cold river. But throughout this, the way the Sikhs remember it is that he's happy in the Creator's will. Tera kiya mitha lage, har naam padarth nanak mange. That he actually thinks of the Creator's will as sweet. And throughout this process, he's not losing focus of the Creator. And he's actually in true happiness throughout this worldly suffering. So we actually completely reject it, worldly suffering in the Sikh experience, and our goal is to get to that point. And even beyond that, Dasme Padshah, the 10th Guru of the Sikhs, their whole experience, and not going too deep, but there's a line in Zafarnama, which he wrote a letter to Aurangzeb, who was the emperor of the time. And in there, he writes when he's in the Machiwada jungle, completely alone after he fought a battle where only 46 fought against 1 million Mughals. And he's currently in the jungle completely alone. But he's remembering the Creator, and he actually quotes this in Zafarnama, Na Sajo, I don't have my instruments, Na Bajo, I don't have my falcon, because that was a symbol of the 10th Padshah, the 10th king of the Sikhs. Na Sajo, Na Bajo, Na Fojo, Na Farsh. I don't have somewhere to sleep on. I don't have my army, but Khudavand Bakshinde Asho Arsh. That the Creator is still giving me heavenly happiness, because the Guru is in constant remembrance of the Creator. And even more than that, the sons of the 10th Guru, Baba Fateh Singh and Baba Zorawar Singh, who were actually bricked alive, and they were only 7 and 9 years old. When they were asked, they were given worldly happiness. They were told, you guys will be made kings if you guys convert. And they were also given worldly torture. They were also tortured as well. So they were given both worldly happinesses, and they were given torture as well, worldly suffering. But they rejected both and chose to stay in the will of the Creator and happy in their faith, which is why they lived, manifested the teachings of Shri Guru Granth Sahib, our holy scripture. Jaan ke dukh sukh sam kar jape, that if you think of happiness and suffering as the same, taan ko kada kahan byape, then what can afflict you? What disease, what anything, how can it affect you? And even the biggest thing is that within all of this, and this is, I'm going to directly address the Sikhs in this room, because when we think of the Ardas, the Ardas is basically a way for us to remember our entire history, and it's a daily prayer Sikhs do twice a day. But I think all Sikhs can agree with me that are in this room that in this Ardas, all we remember is people that went through suffering. Is that right? Right? So as Sikhs, if we're not going through suffering, if we're not taking on the pains of the world, and if we're not fighting against injustice, then we're actually not fulfilling our purpose as Sikhs. And our goal is to be a part of the people who did those things in our daily prayer, in the Ardas. Be a part of the people, जिन्हां ने नाम जपिया, ਵੰਡ ਕੇ ਛਕਿਆ, ਦੇਗ ਚਲਾਈ ਤੇਗ ਵਹਾਈ, ਦੇ ਕੇ ਅੰਡਿਠ ਕੀਤਾ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਧਰਮ ਹਿਤ ਸੀਸ ਦਿੱਤੇ, ਬੰਦ ਕਟਾਏ, ਖੋਪੜੀਆਂ ਲਹਾਈਆਂ. And that entire episode of pain and suffering, if that's not what we're going through, and we're busy in our own happinesses, and we're not taking on the pains of the world, then we should really reflect on ourselves as Sikhs. And the last thing that I want to bring up is the practice and the experience of a Sikh. Jit sarb sukhan phal lodiye, so sach kamavo. That thing that brings all happinesses in the world, bring that truth into your life. Neda dekho parbrahm. Think of God as near at you, closer to you than yourself. Ik naam te avo, remember His name. Hoye sagal ki renka, become the dust of the feet of everyone in the world. Har sang samavo, and God will be near with you. Dukh na dise, dukh na kisai de ji, don't give suffering to any being or any life in this world. Pat syon kar javo, and you will go back to your home with honor. Patat puneet karta purkh nanak sunavo. And this is the vision of the Sikhs, and this is the vision of the Khalsa, because we're supposed to get to a level where we don't think of the world's suffering and the temporary sufferings and temporary happinesses, and we're not affected by them. So we take on those sufferings for the world, and we deliver justice for the rest of the world. And that's where our final vision, Hun Hukam Hua Mehirban da, Peh Koye na Kisai Rajan da. Now the Creator has given his hukam, given his vow. But no one is afflicted with any kind of suffering. Sab sukhali vuttiyan e hua halemi raj jiyo. That everyone is living in peace, and this is the true benevolent rule. And this is what the Sikhs want to deliver to the world, the well-being of all. And this is taking on that suffering and being happy in others' happinesses, and only feeling suffering when other people are suffering. And that's the basic aspect of the Sikh the Sikh perspective of the pursuit of happiness. And sorry for addressing the Sikhs there for a bit, but I think it was important for us as Sikhs to do that reflective exercise as well. So sorry for taking up a little bit more time. That's the Sikh perspective, and I hope you guys took something away from that. Thank you so much. Oh, and the Sikh reading, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
All right, thank you very much, Shriman. I just want to make a quick announcement as well, just to request that if you could please just move on to, if you see a seat in front of you that's empty, if you could move to the front, that will allow us to have the seats at the back empty, and anybody coming in will be able to have a seat more conveniently. So I just wanted to make that announcement. So our next speaker will be representing the Hindu perspective, and his name is Rakesh Naidu. He's a dynamic leader in the Windsor-Essex region. He's known for his commitment to community development and innovative solutions. As the founder of A-Work, and an award-winning on-demand recruiting platform, and ONRX, a virtual healthcare service, he worked tirelessly to support newcomers, international students, and diverse community members. His previous role as CEO and president of the Windsor-Essex Regional Chamber of Commerce, which he held with distinction since 2018, further highlights his leadership and dedication to regional prosperity. Naidu is a chemical engineer with a postgraduate diploma in business management. His belief in giving back to the community is evident in his role as a volunteer teacher with the Art of Living Foundation, where he teaches yoga and meditation. Through these practices, he emphasizes the importance of mental well-being and holistic health, helping individuals cultivate mindfulness and resilience. Naidu's dedication to yoga and meditation not only enriches his life, but also inspires others to embrace these transformative practices for personal growth and community harmony. So I'll give it over to Rakesh to present his perspective.
Let's start off with a prayer. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Good evening, Sat Sri Akal, Namaste, Shalom, Assalamu Alaikum. Greetings, friends. It's wonderful to be here. And first of all, I would like to really congratulate Ibrahim and the team for doing a fabulous job and getting all of us together. And as I said, to really find an opportunity to engage with each other. It's important to really learn from each other, to understand each other's perspective, to celebrate the diversity, and to also look beyond the diversity and to really experience the oneness that we all are, right? So I'm really delighted that we're here. Let me just move this forward. So I'm going to share some insights from the Hindu faith, where happiness is something that is discussed just like in every faith, right? And it is one thing that all of us are seeking, no matter who we are, no matter what denomination, no matter what our background is, all of us are seeking happiness, right? The reason why we're here today is because we want to really get something out of it that will really make us happy, right? Behind every act is a yearning to really experience happiness, right? That's one thing that's really constant, and everyone is really striving for that happiness. And the Hindu scriptures actually have very profound insights in terms of how to tap that happiness and how do we really experience true happiness. Now, one thing that we may think of is that, you know what, this world really needs happiness more than ever, right? But is it really true? I think in every era, no matter when, whether you go 100 years back, 200, 500, 1,000 years back, every era has had some or the other strife, has had some or the other chaos, right? That's one thing that has also remained pretty much constant. So while we are all looking for happiness, just know that every era, every generation has gone through some challenges, and through those challenges, they have really looked for, they've explored happiness. And in the Hindu faith, that is something that has been really tapped into in terms of how within the situation, the environment that we are in, how do we really experience happiness in spite of the chaos, right? So happiness not when there is no chaos, but happiness when there is chaos all around us. So, you know, we all yearn for happiness. Look, when we were young, you know, an ice cream gave us happiness. A toy, when we had a toy, when we bought that one toy that some other friend had and we wanted it, when we really thought that that toy we'll get will become happy, right? And when we got that toy, it was something else. Well, when I get to, you know, to grade 10, and when I have a lot of friends, and when I'm in high school, I'll be happy, right? And then you got to that point. And from there, it was, well, you know, if I get into the sports team and if I do really well and if I win this championship, I'll be happy. And you got that, right? From there, it went to, well, I need to get into a really good school and I want to pursue higher education. And you got that. And then when you achieved that, then it was, well, if I really get a job, a really fantastic job, a great career, if I have, you know what, then I'll be happy, right? And when you got that, then it shifted to, well, I need to find a life partner. You know, if I really find a good life partner, I'll be happy, right? And you got that life partner. And from there, it was, well, if I then move to this particular position in a company, and if I really own a large company, or if I'm the CEO of the company, I'll be happy. So you see, every time we hit one stage, or when we really get something which we think would give us happiness, what happens? We then move that happiness, or what we think would give us happiness, to something else in the future. And that goalpost keeps on changing, right? So is happiness really a mirage? Like, when will we really be happy? At what point of time can we say, you know what, I've got what I wanted and now I'm going to be happy? Or are we going to just say, you know what, there's something else out there in the future. Once I get that, I'll be happy. And by the way, that thing is like a mirage which we can never get to. So in the Hindu faith, we believe that it is not when we really get a certain thing in the world, it's not a worldly object, it is not a certain achievement, it is not something that we accumulate, and when we achieve, that will give us that happiness, true happiness. It is, the true happiness is the bliss or the ananda which we get through self-realization. When we really understand who we are, when we dive into our own depth and understand this that I'm made up of, this which exists in the whole creation, this which is in every atom, and that is what I am. And that self-realization, when one gets to, that is when we are aligned with the divine, and that is when we experience bliss. And this is very well beautifully said in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the holy scripture of the Hindus. Here it says that he who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires, who can refrain from all longing and is free from the sense of possession, he is ever content and happy. So it is not about really accumulating, achieving, or really getting something from the physical world that makes us happy. Desires will come and go. As I was talking about, how we from childhood, there's always something or the other that we desire, and then we keep on postponing our happiness, right? So desires, when fulfilled, bring us back to the same starting point. If you look at our mental state, right? We had this mental state when we needed something, and that got fulfilled, and afterwards what happens? The mind comes back to the same point, right? So desires, or the fulfillment of desires, doesn't give us happiness. Happiness comes from inner contentment and alignment with one's dharma, or one's duty. The Upanishad explains this very beautifully as well. True happiness is not found in external objects, but in the Atma and the self. Whatever we call it, whether we call it the creator, the self, the power, the vibration, the energy, whatever name you give it, when we are aligned with that, that is when we experience happiness. And realizing the self is key to achieving lasting happiness. So one thing that we know is that it is not the external objects, it is not really achieving certain things that give us happiness. So what is it that gives us happiness, right? Happiness is not external, it is really a state of mind. See, what happens with us is that our mind goes and vacillates all the time. Even as we sit here and you're listening, the mind is actually now taking a detour. It's gone away thinking of something, is agreeing with me, is disagreeing with me. And sometimes what it is doing, it is also going into the past. And when it goes into the past, it is bringing up some memories that may not be very pleasant, some regret, something that has happened that we were not very comfortable with, and that brings with it stress. And when the mind is not in the past, it moves into the future. And when it is into the future, it is really full of anxiety. It doesn't know what's going to happen. It's worrying about what's going to come, right? That also brings stress. So mind vacillates from the past to the future. And while it vacillates, the stress is really generated. That stress doesn't allow us to settle down, doesn't allow us to be centered, doesn't allow us to experience the happiness that we are, right? Happiness is in the present moment. We've all heard of this, isn't it? We all say, well, let's live in the present moment, right? Let's live in the present moment. But how do we really live in the present moment? Because it is important to live in the present moment. Life is happening now, in this moment. While our mind vacillates from the past to the future, life is happening now in every moment. Every moment is deep, and every moment life is happening, right? And that is a state of mind. So how do we really get to experiencing that present moment, right? And that present moment can be experienced by yoga, which is the union of the mind, body, and the soul. In the Patanjali, or in the Yoga Sutra, it says, Heyam Dukkham Anagatam, meaning yoga can prevent whatever pain has not yet been experienced, it can prevent that from coming, right? So it is a proactive way to avoid pain from coming into your world. Now, how do we do that, right? It is good to say that, yeah, you can do it. And how does yoga do it? This is where, breath plays a very important role. And all the practices that is there in the yoga tradition, in the Hindu faith, it has a lot to do with the breath and the regulation of breath, which is called the pranayama, right? Many of us have heard the term pranayama. See, breath knows no language, knows no religion. Everyone is blessed with breath. That's the first act of life. The first act of life is breathing in. And the last act of life is breathing out. Between a breath in and a breath out is an entire existence, right? Now, what is very interesting? That every emotion that comes into us, every thought that leads to an emotion has a corresponding rhythm in the breath, right? You might have noted this, that when you're angry, your breath is short and it's fast, right? When you're very sad, the breath is shallow. And when you're very, looking at a picture, you're looking at a scenery, you're very, very calm and the breath is deep. Every emotion has a corresponding breath. And the emotions and the thoughts are linked to that breath. All our life, the emotions come, and we are in a turmoil. We actually go in many different directions based on what kind of emotion it is. But if we can use breath, and now we can skillfully use the breath, it can actually help us in managing the emotions properly. So skillful use of breath is an important tool, and pranayama is an important tool that we can learn, because by using that, we can manage our emotions, we can manage our thoughts, and we can live a life where we can be in the present moment and experience that happiness that the present moment gives. And meditation is a wonderful tool to do that, because meditation actually helps us in centering ourselves, becoming equanimous, diving deep into ourselves. As I was saying, happiness is not inside, it is when we realize ourselves. And meditation is a way to realize ourselves, to dive deep into the source, and that depth and that source is from where all happiness springs. And that is what meditation provides. So the path to happiness is, to be content with what we have, and to really not really look for worldly pleasures, because that is short-lived and is ephemeral. Seek knowledge. The wisdom gives us that. Act selflessly. Happiness doesn't come when we are only about us. Happiness comes when we are giving to others. That is what true happiness is. And then strive for devotion. Really experience and rejoice with this creation, and be full of gratitude for what this divine has given us. And practice pranayama meditation, which is a way to really tap into that source. So before I end, there is a prayer that is for peace and for everyone's benefit. And the prayer goes, Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kashita Bhagavavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. It means, may all sentient be at peace. May no one suffer from illness. May all see what is auspicious. May no one suffer. Om, peace, peace, peace. Finally, I'll conclude by saying that happiness is an inward journey, not an external journey. It's guided by wisdom and discipline and alignment with one's own true self. True and lasting happiness is not in material objects or achievements. It's a state of bliss when one is really centered and in deep samadhi through meditation. Thank you for giving your time, and have a great evening.
All right, thank you very much, Rakesh. I could really relate to your point about, when you achieve one thing, then you want to continue to, strive for another. That last slice of pizza, that's not a thing. There's always room for more. So,
So you get to my age.
so thank you very much, Rakesh. That joke didn't land well. Noted. I'll try another one. So before we move on, I'm just going to request the same thing again. So if you see a spot and you're able to move forward comfortably, I would request that you could please move forward. We do have more guests coming in, and so it'll open up space for them and allow them to take a seat as well. And I remember to move the PowerPoint. Perfect. It's hard multitasking, but multitasking in front of 100 people is even harder. So bear with me. All right, so next we have the humanist/atheist perspective, and that will be done by Steve. Now, Steve has been a friend of ours for a while. He's been at our previous 2 events as well. So we thank him for that, and we welcome him again. He has a Bachelor of Arts in History and a Bachelor of Education in primary, junior, and intermediate grades. He was raised as a free thinker and has been married to a Christian for 10 years. Steve and his wife, Cindy, believe in the importance of bridging the gap between believers and non-believers. Their 2 young children are being raised in an interfaith household and have the unique opportunity to experience life from 2 completely different worldviews. The boys are ultimately free to choose their own path, without the pressure to conform in any particular direction. Steve has spent the better part of a decade in the service to humanism, a philosophical worldview that places the highest emphasis on dignity, well-being, empathy, and scientific investigation. He is a licensed official who can perform weddings, funerals, and various celebrations of life. He is also currently working on a book that is called Humanism from the Heart, and which is expected to be published in January of 2025. So I want to give the floor now to Steve. Let's welcome him.
Thank you so much for being here today. That was a really great introduction. Everything Akil says is true. I am Steve, and all those things are true. Is there a mic in the audience anywhere? Oh, mic check done. Awesome. Okay. It's really cool, as previous speakers have said, that pursuit of happiness is such a good topic because it can be, you can interpret it in so many different ways. And the first two speakers interpreted it in two different ways. I'm going to interpret it in another way. I'm going to take you on an emotional roller coaster. I hope you're at least this high. I was going to say this high, but I saw some kids walking in. So this is going to be a bit of an emotional roller coaster. And I'm sure that the other speakers are also going to be talking about it from their perspective as well, and also adding their 2 cents. So first thing, if everyone is willing and able, I'd like you to rise out of your seat and shake your sillies out. Awesome, you can be seated whenever you want. So I want to thank the Ahmadiyya Muslim Students Association again for having me for a third time. Either I'm part of their pursuit of happiness or they just are a glutton for punishment. And I'm okay with either of those things. And I'd like to take a moment from my allotted time to honor a very truly and caring and remarkable person who cannot be here due to unfortunate circumstances. His name is Ali Hashmat, and he hosted the first symposium where I spoke from an atheist/humanist perspective. And he's truly missed, and I hope I do him justice tonight. So I want to emphasize why I asked to represent both atheism and humanism together. Atheism is just the lack of belief in any deities. It's nothing more than that. There's no atheist philosophy on its own, and that's where humanism comes in. So as Akil did mention, humanism is a philosophical and ethical stance that emphasizes the value and agency of human beings, focusing on reason, ethics, and justice, rather than religious dogma. It promotes the idea that humans can lead fulfilling lives based on rational thought and empathy, and often advocating for individual rights, social justice, and the pursuit of knowledge. As for the topic of the discussion tonight, happiness is the goal, obviously. So for over 200,000 years, it has been humanity's goal to thrive and survive as a species and socially evolve. The search for well-being and happiness have gone hand in hand with that growth, and it's influenced medical and social advancements. At times, misunderstandings or conflicts can arise, where the pursuit of our own happiness comes at the expense of others. Differences in belief systems and competing political ideologies have often led to, oh boy, hitting things here now. Differences in belief systems and competing political ideologies have often led to divisions between groups of people. Humanists have the distinct benefit of accepting everyone for who they are, regardless of their political leanings, religious beliefs, sexual preferences, gender identities, and ethnic backgrounds. While there are some exceptions, such as those who cause harm to others through physical and psychological violence, the focus is not on seeking eternal punishment. Instead, humanists prioritize rehabilitation and, when needed, confinement during this lifetime, with the understanding that justice is grounded in the here and now, rather than relying on uncertain divine retribution. Happiness is a privilege that we hold in this part of the world and at this moment in history. It's important to recognize how fortunate we are to be able to walk outside without the threat of being hit by missiles, and to be able to express our own differences in beliefs without fear of execution or exile. Others are not so fortunate. Through humanism, I believe that we can create a meaningful change that other philosophical systems may not achieve. Organizations like Go Humanity, Modest Needs, and Doctors Without Borders are focusing on the people without requiring religious conversion or forcing them to listen to a sermon before receiving medical attention, food, or clothing. These organizations also highlight the importance of interfaith collaboration in a secular or non-religious context, setting aside biases and dogma to support the most vulnerable individuals in our world. Humanism can be expressed by people of faith too, prioritizing the well-being and happiness of all individuals, regardless of differing beliefs, reflects a deep commitment to human dignity and empathy. This inclusive approach enriches both faith-based and secular perspectives, fostering a shared goal of compassion and understanding in society. So in other words, if you place your priorities on the pursuit of happiness for all people, in spite of your beliefs, then you're a humanist. There have been many religious humanists throughout the history, and there are probably a good many in this room today. A good litmus test for gauging whether an idea will encourage happiness is John Rawls' veil of ignorance. It's a powerful concept for evaluating fairness and justice in societal systems. By imagining ourselves in a scenario without knowledge of our own identity, we can prioritize principles that promote equality and well-being for all. This thought experiment encourages us to create policies that ensure basic rights, opportunities, and resources are accessible to everyone, fostering a more just and harmonious society. It emphasizes empathy and the importance of considering the collective good over individual interests. Imagine designing a social system for the world behind a curtain. Think about what the best situation for everyone behind the veil would be without knowing who you're going to be on the other side. For example, if you say that some people can be enslaved and owned as property, then put that into practice. Those enslaved would not be happy in their circumstances. So the best case for well-being would be designing a system without slavery. Many more examples can be thought of, and I bet you're concocting one in your head right now. My goal here is not to convert anyone to atheism. I personally don't care if you believe in a God, multiple gods, no gods at all. The most important word to me is collaboration. We need to work together to ensure that this world is a place of joy for everyone, present and future, regardless of our beliefs, and based on, if nothing else, our mutual pursuit of happiness. All we have is each other. I want to leave you with this thought and cede the rest of my time. I look forward to some thoughtful questions from all of you. And when you come and talk to me afterwards, I want to hear about your own individual pursuit for happiness, what you do to reach happiness on your own, and what you've done to make others happy. Thank you all for being here today. It's an honor and a privilege to just have your attention for this brief moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. So before we move on to the next perspective, I'm just going to give a quick reminder that we do have a question and answer session at the end. And so the way that we've set it up is that you can scan this QR code, or you can visit this link, and you can submit your questions, and then we'll be able to do questions that way. So if you want to think of questions right now, or go to the link and maybe check it out, then you're free to do that. All right, so the next perspective that we have will be the Jewish perspective, and that will be done by Rabbi Hazen Cantor Devorah Fick. She is the spiritual leader to the congregation Beth El in South Windsor. She grew up in Lansing, Michigan, and served in the U.S. Air Force as an officer for 7 years before changing course to serve the Jewish people. Additionally, Rabbi Devorah is a certified mashpia, or spiritual director, a member of the Association for Rabbis and Cantors of Jewish Renewal, a founding member of the Reformed Cantors and Cantorial Soloists of Canada, and is an active member of both the Michigan Board of Rabbis and the Michigan Board of Cantors. Rabbi Devorah serves in the Greater Windsor Interfaith community as a member of the Interfaith Group of Windsor and Essex County, the Military Institute of Windsor, and as a current member of the Board of Directors of Iona College in Windsor and Governor of Seminary for the Alliance of Jewish Renewal. Rabbi Hazen Devorah brings to the Windsor Jewish community engaging, participatory, and musical Shabbat and holiday services. She is also a passionate student of the Torah, committed to engaging ancient texts so that they are relevant to our modern lives. Rabbi Devorah's sincere prayer is to provide a warm, helpful, and caring presence and to represent Congregation Beth El to the Greater Windsor community. Deborah is married to Jim, and they are parents to 4 teenagers or young adults, Ethan, Ryan, Ellie, and Sophiana. So I would like to now give the floor over to Deborah, and let's welcome her.
Good evening. All right, let's see. Do I just hit the arrows like that? All right, it's very simple. Okay. I want to have you do something very simple. If you would close your eyes right now. We'll all close our eyes and just think of the most beautiful day of your life. And open them, and I'll tell you about the most beautiful day of my life. It was October 30th, 2007, and after only 2 hours of labor, I had given birth to my daughter, Sophiana. And I gave birth to her at home in our bathtub with my other children there and my husband and a midwife. And as I sat in the chair in my bedroom, I nursed my newborn baby and I looked out the window. It was fall, and I lived in the state of Georgia in the United States, and it was warm out, and the sky was a crisp, crisp blue. And there was a tree right outside of our house, and the leaves on the tree were the brightest orange I'd ever seen that day. It was at the peak of its color that morning. And against the blue of the sky, it was just the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. That was the happiest, most beautiful morning of my life. I want you to do this again. Close your eyes with me. We're going to do something a little harder this time. I want you to imagine the hardest day of your life. And open your eyes. October 27th, 2013 was the hardest morning of my life. It was overcast and it was cold. It was the first snow of the year in Missoula, Montana. I woke up and I realized that the night before had not been a dream. My husband was dead, and I had 2 young children at home. And I had to tell my kindergartner and my first grader that their dad had died in an accident the night before. The first example, the hardest or the easiest day, the most wonderful day, the most beautiful day of my life, I woke up and I did the traditional Jewish prayer, Moda ani lefanacha melchai v'kayam shechezarta bi nishmati b'chemla chaba emunatacha. Thank you, God, for waking me up today and reviving my soul, returning it to me so that I can live another day. Great is your faithfulness. It's really easy when we're happy and when we have a beautiful day to thank God for waking us up. But what do we say on the hardest day of our life? How do we pray and thank God for returning our soul to us when we've lost someone and we don't know how we will go on in our life? And we certainly don't know, perhaps, how we'll tell our young children, or whatever your story is. That's mine. At the end of that prayer, there's a key to how we do this. And I'll tell you at the end of my talk what I came to understand, because I believe, and I think Judaism teaches, that we can't really understand happiness until we understand grief and loss. In Jewish tradition, happiness is closely tied to shalom, or peace. It is not about avoiding life's difficulties, but about finding completeness within them. The Talmud, which is essentially Jewish commentary on our scriptures, the Talmud asks, who is rich? And it answers, one who is happy with what they have. This teaching reframes happiness as contentment and gratitude, even amidst uncertainty. But Judaism does not view happiness as a solitary pursuit. Ours is a deeply communal faith. From prayer to life cycle events, Jewish life centers on the collective. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory taught that joy increases when we share it. When there is joy in a home, it brings joy to all who enter. Shabbat, which is our Sabbath, it's the heart of Jewish communal practice, and it embodies this principle. It's a time when Jews gather together, and we reflect and we celebrate and we sing, and we create a shared sanctuary of peace and connection in this chaotic world. The world is chaotic. And so I think that one of the things that we are called to do as people who seek happiness and people who seek faith is to find meaning in that chaos. So Judaism teaches that chaos can be a catalyst for growth and transformation. I would argue that my happiest day is happier because of my saddest day. The Torah's opening verses describe tohu vavohu, the primordial chaos from which God creates the world. Similarly, we are invited to bring meaning and order to our lives, even in turbulent times. Viktor Frankl, a Jewish thinker and Holocaust survivor, observed in his quintessential book, Man's Search for Meaning, that happiness arises as a byproduct of living with purpose. And even amidst great suffering, Frankl found that those who embraced a sense of responsibility to others, to their values, and to their faith were able to endure with dignity and with hope. I mentioned Shabbat, our Sabbath that we have. It's every Friday night and it goes into Saturday, and it's for 25 hours. We want that extra hour to make sure, because Jewish people are people who are very detail oriented, we want to make sure we've observed the full time, but also I think we err on the side of joy. And it's a time of joy and rest. And so we want to make sure that we're getting all of the time for that day. So it's 25 hours. It's a reflection, a practice of weekly joy and connection, and it invites us to step back from the chaos of this world. On Shabbat, we gather with our family and friends, and we share meals and songs and prayers. We also believe in Judaism that happiness comes through responsibility. It's one thing to have a day off from work, but if we had every single day off from work, I don't know about you, but I actually start to feel depressed after a while because I feel that my life lacks purpose. We find purpose in Judaism through a couple of things specifically. One of them is tikkun olam, which means repairing the world and having purpose in doing God's work. That's a way that we can find collective joy in this world. And as Rabbi Sacks says, true joy comes from giving and not taking. And so if we live our life in purpose to give others from ourselves, we often find that we are given a lot of purpose and happiness. Finally, in Judaism, we find that through gratitude and faith and prayer to God, we can find true happiness. I gave you the Moda Ani prayer as the prayer that is easy on a day that's really happy, and on a day that's difficult, we still have to say it. Moda ani lefanacha melachai v'kayam shehachazarta binishmati rabba emunotecha. So the first part of that prayer, I told you, it's very, very easy to say, thank you, God, for returning my soul to me, and be grateful for that and show gratitude to God for that on the happiest day of your life. But how do we do that on the most difficult day of our lives? And that's really what Judaism asks us to do, even in the hard days. The end of that prayer, Rabba emunatecha, is taken from the book of Lamentations. It means great is your faithfulness. So the idea is that sometimes we go to God and we just say, you're faithful. That's all I need. And slowly in our lives, God will help us to work back to thanking God for giving us life and returning our soul to us and waking us up in the morning. We can do this through prayer. The Psalms tell us to let us rejoice and be glad. That's easy when we're happy and we have a good day. But there's also a form of prayer called hitbodedut in Hebrew, and it's the prayer of the heart. It's just talking to God. I have a friend who likes to go outside and she likes to look up at the trees and pray. And she says to me, on nice days, I put my makeup on and I go outside and I look up at the trees and I pray and I talk to God. And on rainy days, I simply don't put my makeup on because I know I'm still going to go outside and I'm going to look up at the trees and the rain will fall on my face. But the conversation is the same. She still meets God on the hardest days. I'll leave you tonight with Lamentations 3:19 through 23, which is the end of that opening prayer. This is the full text of that section. I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I will remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of Adonai's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Deborah, for your presentation. So just so you guys can have a little bit of a break, I know we've been sitting for a while, so you guys can take about 20 to 30 seconds. If you want to stand up, you're feel free to do that as well. And then I'm going to sneak in that announcement again. If you want to move forward while you're standing, it's convenient, just so the people that are coming in, they don't feel uncomfortable taking a seat. All right, so I hope that everybody's feeling more refreshed and rejuvenated. So we have 2 more presentations left. And next, I will be doing the introduction of Dr. John Capucci, who is the President and Vice Chancellor of Assumption University. He will be presenting the Christian perspective. In assuming the role at the Assumption University, he became the first layperson to become president since Assumption's founding over 167 years ago. Prior to his appointment as president, Dr. Capucci served as principal and vice chancellor from 2020 to 2024 and interim principal from 2019 to 2020. He holds a PhD from Carleton University, a Master of Arts from Queen's University in Kingston, and an honors Bachelor of Arts degree from University of Windsor. John also has an active research agenda with refereed publications in Journal of Contemporary Anti-Semitism, Contemporary Jewry, Canadian Jewish Studies, Fieldwork in Religion, Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs, and Journal of Shia Islamic Studies. His most recent article on the perception of anti-Semitism in the Diocese of London was published by the Bulletin for the Study of Religion. His research has also been discussed by local and regional media. In addition to his research record, John also has taught courses from across the humanities and social sciences, resulting in top teaching scores. He has also served on graduate committees mentoring a future generation of academics. From 2022 to 2024, he has served as the chair of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities in Canada. So I now give the floor over to John. Let's welcome him.
Well, good evening, and thank you for having me. After that biography, you're going to expect that I'm going to have to do fireworks, right? But I want to begin by thanking the Ahmadiyya Muslim Students Association for organizing this wonderful event. And if you ever think about organizing a wedding or something, you talk to them because they really know what they're doing. I'm really impressed with everything tonight. I think more than ever now in our lives, we need dialogue, interfaith dialogue and communication across various religious traditions and beliefs. So the opportunity to have this with 6 traditions on the panel is really a pleasure, and it's really something that I'm very excited about and very pleased to be here. When I saw the topic, I have to admit, the pursuit of happiness and Christianity, I said, what's option 2? Because I said, well, this is going to be a bit of a challenging topic because in Christianity, and keep in mind, Christianity is very diverse in itself, there is one answer to that. But the difficulty is in the execution, the actualization of that pursuit of happiness. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. One of the very famous saints, St. Philip of Neri, who is known as the Apostle of Rome, he's also known as one of the patron saints of happiness. I'm going to quote him. He said, "A servant of God ought to always be in good spirits. Charity and cheerfulness, or charity and humility, should always be our motto." So what he's basically saying is that Christians are always happy, and that's what we know to be true, right? Not really, no. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how Christians are expected to pursue happiness and what might happen and what might not happen. So for Christians, as I said, the answer is fairly easy. One achieves happiness by letting Christ into your heart, into your soul, into your mind, into your daily lives. That's the answer, but it's a bit more challenging than that, okay? As you know, the teachings of Jesus always stressed harmony and peace, selflessness, non-materialism, non-violence. And if you incorporate that into your lives, it's hopeful that you will achieve a more harmonious life. And if you were to think of the antonyms of those words, war and disharmony, cruelty and selfishness and violence, how can anyone be happy when you exemplify those characteristics? You can't. So you're saying, well, listen, I got it all covered. I know what you mean by letting Christ into your life as a Christian. You go to church on Sundays for 1 hour, you put $5 in the envelope, and you run out the door before Sunday football starts, right? That's how you achieve happiness. That's how you let Christ into your life. Well, no. You have to think about the other 167 hours a week. What are you doing for the rest of the week? Not just that 1 hour on Sunday when you're running in and out of church. What are you doing for the rest of the week? That's the key. Are you exemplifying kindness and charity? Are you exemplifying mercy and peace? In Christianity, we speak a lot in the Gospel of Matthew about the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Thinking about those things, are you exemplifying those teachings? Are you exemplifying the teachings of the corporal acts of mercy? Feeding those who are hungry, clothing those who are naked, giving water to those who are thirsty, visiting those who are in prison, visiting those who are sick. Those are the ways of the Christian faith. But you have to think about it from another angle. If we were to exemplify all these teachings that Jesus has taught us through the Gospels in our daily lives, just think about how society would be, how harmonious society would be if we actually took these things in, and what kind of happy world we would achieve. So as I said at the beginning, the answer is easy, but the exemplification is the challenging point. If one were to summarize Jesus's teachings, and actually someone did this in the Gospels, they went to him and they said, Lord, what is the greatest of commandments? And Rabbi DeVore will tell you in Judaism, the religion that Jesus belonged to, there were 613 commandments, and there are 613 commandments in Judaism. So you have to say, well, I might not be able to do all of them, but there's got to be one major one. If I got to do one, just summarize it for me. And he does. And he says, love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. That is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is, love your neighbor as yourself. And all the laws of the prophets hang on these two commandments. So the greatest commandment that Jesus is telling his followers is, of course, to love God, follow God's teachings. And then the second is to love each other and treat others well, which, as you've heard from all my colleagues today, and you're going to hear from the Imam, I'm assuming as well, is essentially what we're all trying to say. We're saying it differently, but we're all saying to treat others well, treat others respectfully, be kind. It's about others. My high school motto was Alice non ziba, which meant in Latin, for others, not oneself. And I never forgot that. If you think about Jesus' ministry, Jesus didn't go around wearing fancy clothes or opulent jewels or buying a fancy house or riding a champion horse. He didn't do any of that. It was always for other people. It was for others. And it was for others that you think he might not have gotten along with, like the Roman centurion's servant or individuals who were outcast in society. Those are the people that he was hanging around with. If we can exemplify those, let's just think of what a happier world we would achieve. And of course, Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, which was the ultimate sacrifice for others, and that's what we teach. So I want to conclude by stressing the Christian perspective is largely about others, about helping others, and putting oneself aside for a little bit, and not thinking so much about the material complex of the world. And I want to conclude by sharing a personal story, which is, for those of you that know me, is somewhat rare. As you heard from Keel, I study other people's religions, but I really don't talk about my own. I know that's hypocritical, and I should have basically stepped down from the stage now, but no, what I want to do is I want to share something. A few years ago, at the beginning of 2022, my grandfather passed away. And this was a very strong man, someone who worked 7 days a week at Chrysler's, and very tough. And he was fighting cancer, and you couldn't even tell he was fighting off cancer. That's how strong he was. The night that the ambulance came, I didn't think he was going to pass away. The medics that came and they asked him, they said, "How do you feel, Mr. Minotti?" "Great, good. I'm going to go to the Dominican Republic soon. You want to come?" And he said that to them. And he showed them his exercises that he did. And I said, well, he seems okay, you know. And that night he passed away. And I have to say, and I'm going to put my notes away, I was angry that he passed away. I was angry with God. I was angry with the church. I was angry with the doctors. I was angry with everybody. And I kept it in. As a professional, I didn't think it was appropriate to, show all that. And I kept it in for a while. But when you keep anger inside for a while, it becomes poison, whether you like it or not. And then someone spoke to me. Call it God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to say, but something of divine origins was speaking to me and said to me, you have to do this thing, John. You have to do this task. This task is specifically set for you to do. You have the know-how, you have the ability, you have the resources, you have to do it. And I was ignoring it. And then one day an opportunity came forward where I said, I'm going to do this. And I still had that anger in me. I had that frustration and all that. And Assumption University celebrated its 165th anniversary a couple of years ago. And I decided to create 2 scholarships in honor of my grandfathers. And no one knew what I was doing. My parents didn't know, my grandparents, my grandmother didn't know, even Assumption didn't know what I was doing. I don't even know if I knew what I was doing, but I did it. And the minute I asked for those 2 checks to come forward, that anger that I had right here disappeared. Why? because I did something for others. I did something for students who might have an opportunity to come to university, and I helped them. I did something in honor of my grandfathers who also didn't have an opportunity to go to university, but now their memory is going to be attached to a university. And I did something for, as Jesus would have said, for the sake of others. Do what is for the least of me, and do that for me. And I felt much better in doing that. So I hope I was able to summarize the Christian tradition in less than 10 minutes. And I'm happy to take questions at the end of the event. But I want to thank you all for joining us today. And again, my colleagues, it's been an honor. So thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, John, for that presentation. Next, we'll be moving on to the final presentation, which will be the Muslim perspective, and that will be delivered by Imam Zishan Muzaffar Ahmed. He holds a doctorate in comparative religions and theology from Jamia Ahmadiyya, Canada. With a rich background in service, he has been a regional imam and missionary in Ghana and Mexico under the guidance of Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah be his helper. Notably, Imam Zishan played a key role in overseeing the construction of the Mahmoud Mosque Community Center in Regina, Saskatchewan, and is recognized as an honorary chief by the Standing Buffalo First Nations. His commitment extends to serving on the editorial board of CBC Saskatchewan and spearheading projects like the Ahmadiyya First Nations Friendship Park in Qu'Appelle, Saskatchewan. Currently, he serves as a regional imam in Windsor, Ontario, and is actively involved in the construction project of the Windsor Baitul Ehsan Mosque complex. So I'm going to give over the floor to Zishan now. Let's welcome him.
I'm going to get out of the way. I saw my colleagues struggling all night with the laptops, and I just took it out of the way. Okay. I begin with the traditions of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and according to the customs of Islam. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Ever Merciful, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon everybody that is attending tonight. I know that my colleagues took the opportunity to thank the organizers, as I also am thankful for the arrangements that they've done tonight. But at the same time, I think it's due that I also thank my colleagues, because this was also a tradition of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would say that if you want to stay happy, you want to stay balanced, be a thankful person. Be thankful to those around you. So thank you to my colleagues. I know many times these events or events with such natures, many people come in with this ideology that this is a competition. But you'll see tonight, we all sat at the table, and I think many of us do have a connection on a personal level too, where we meet outside from here too. We're friends. And I think that's what the main thing we need to take from here tonight. We are friends. We have that. So I thank everybody for their perspective. And you guys did a wonderful job tonight. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And my community also appreciates that. Good evening, everybody. It is an honor to stand before you tonight to reflect on one of the most pressing issues of our time, the pursuit of happiness. Ladies and gentlemen, in a world increasingly dominated by materialism, in a world where everything seems to be available at a touch of a button, where success is measured by wealth, status, and possessions, it is all too easy to forget the true meaning of happiness. His Holiness, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah strengthen his hands, the head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, stated in a national gathering for the women of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. He says that we are living in a world where no matter how rich someone is, they always want more. Instead of being grateful for what they have, they are preoccupied with what they do not have. These words carry a profound truth, and in the quest for more, we often lose sight of the blessings already available in our lives. We often become consumed by what we lack, and in doing so, we miss the very essence of happiness. Ladies and gentlemen, in many ways, our world today, to me at least, resembles the plot of J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, where the antagonist, Voldemort, desperately seeks the elixir of life, hoping it will grant him immorality. Just as Voldemort's quest for eternal life is an obsession that blinds him to everything else, many of us today are obsessed with material wealth and the illusion of happiness or what it might bring us. The more we accumulate, the more we want. This is the essence of what psychologists today call the hedonic treadmill. The idea is simple, yet very disturbing. They say the more you get, the more you desire. And the more you strive, the more reason you find to strive. In the age of social media, this dynamic is then amplified through platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, where we constantly are exposed to the lives of others, most of whom are showing only their highlights. The power of comparison has never been stronger. We know more than ever about the lives of the haves, and in return, we feel this sting of envy as many perceive themselves to be the have-nots. This has created a society where rather than being grateful for what we have, we are focused on what we do not have. This again brings to mind an observation made by His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah strengthen his hands. He says, the reality is that the majority of the people of the world are continuing to live at the base poverty level or even below it. Adding petrol to the fire of their torment is the fact that they are now constantly exposed to images of affluent lifestyles and immense purchasing power of people in the developed world, while being even the most basic essentials for their families remains a daily struggle for them. Indeed, in our hyper-connected world, the disparity between the haves and the have-nots is not just felt, it is constantly showcased. We can only imagine the emotional toll this takes on the unprivileged world, who not only face the daily struggle to strive, but are also constantly reminded of what they lack. Ladies and gentlemen, in such a world of comparison and cravings, where does true happiness lie? And I think many of my colleagues touched upon this too. However, Islam unequivocally promotes the fact that this is a temporary world, and our true pursuit is in the life of the hereafter. The Holy Quran offers us a clear answer. It reminds us repeatedly that the pursuit of material wealth at best is fleeting. In Surah Al Imran, chapter 6, verse 33 of the Holy Quran, God Almighty says, "And worldly life is nothing but a sport and a pastime. And surely the abode of the hereafter is better for those who are righteous. Will you not then understand, O man?" This verse teaches us that material pursuits are brief. They are like a passing game, offering no lasting fulfillments. Yet despite this, humans continue to chase after them, hoping that wealth, status, and possessions will bring them lasting satisfaction. The reality is, however, that true happiness cannot be found in these fleeting things. In the Holy Quran, Allah speaks, or God speaks, of a status of an internal peace that transcends worldly challenges. In Surat Al-Fajr, chapter 89, verse 28 to 31 of the Holy Quran, God describes the status of a nafse mutmainna, or the soul that is at rest, a soul that is at peace with itself and with its creator. The Holy Quran states, and I quote, "And thou, O soul at peace, return to thy Lord well pleased with him, and he well pleased with thee. So enter thou amongst my chosen servants, and enter thou my garden." Ladies and gentlemen, this status of peace is not conditional on wealth, status, or external circumstances. Rather, it is a peace that comes from aligning oneself with the will of God. The founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian alayhi salatu wasalam, may peace and blessings of God be upon him, in his literary works titled The Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam, explains this soul. He says, the soul undergoes a great transformation in this very life and is bestowed a paradise while still in this world. This transformation, this paradise on earth, is not a retreat from the world, but a change in perspective. Islam and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, does not teach us to renounce the world entirely. Instead, it calls us to find balance, to engage with the world, but not to be consumed by it. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, demonstrated this through his own life, moments of deep personal connection with God through prayers and solitude, as well as moments of engagement with his community in acts of justice and service. Both were necessary for the true pursuit of happiness. For the pursuit of happiness, one of the core principles that Islam teaches to attain peace and contentment is gratitude. The Quran is full of verses that emphasizes the importance of being grateful to God for the blessings we have. No matter how small they may seem, the Quran gives us an example, such as Prophet Luqman. In his wisdom, he advises his son as saying, "O my son, be grateful to God, and whoso is grateful only for the good of his own soul." Surah Luqman, chapter 31, verse 12 of the Holy Quran. Gratitude has a transforming power. It shifts our focus from what we lack to what we have. It helps us appreciate the small blessings, the simple moments of joy, and the relationships that truly bring us happiness. This gratitude is not just for material gifts, but also the spiritual gifts that we receive from God. For the pursuit of happiness, Islam teaches that happiness and contentment are not the absence of hardship, but rather the ability to find peace despite hardships. In fact, it is during times of trial and adversity that our true connection is tested. The Holy Quran acknowledges the reality of hardships and offers solace, and it assures that every difficulty is followed by ease. And the Holy Quran says, and I quote, "Surely there is ease after hardship. Surely there is ease after hardship." Surah Inshirah, chapter 94, verse 6 to 7 of the Holy Quran. Ladies and gentlemen, prophets such as Noah, Moses, Zechariah, Jesus, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may the peace and blessings of God be upon all of them, faced immense personal trials, yet their commitment remained rooted in their connection to God. Prophet Noah, for example, prayed for God's help when he was faced with the loss of his family. Prophet Moses turned to God in times of hardship in Egypt. Prophet Jesus supplicated to the heavens when he was put on the cross. And Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, he prostrated for hours in the cave of Hira. They sought refuge in God, not because they sought to avoid hardship, but because they knew that true peace came from turning to God. In the end, and in regards to the pursuit of happiness, how can one find it? I'm going to quote another verse of the Holy Quran God Almighty, He says, it is in the remembrance of Allah that the hearts can find comfort. Surah Al-Ra'd, chapter 13, verse 29 of the Holy Quran. I am going to leave you tonight with a quote. Sometimes I personally trying to evaluate where I stand with that connection and the happiness that I have found with God. I analyze and observe this quote, and I leave you with this quote tonight. And this is from the writings of His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. He says, "Our paradise lies in our God. Our highest delight is in our God, for we have seen Him and found every beauty in Him. This wealth is worth pursuing, though one may have to lay down one's life to pursue it. This ruby is worth purchasing, though one may have to lose oneself to acquire it. O ye who are deprived, hasten to this fountain, as it will satisfy you. It is the fountain of life that will save you. What am I to do, and how shall I impress the hearts with this good news? What sort of drum am I to beat in the streets in order to make the announcement that this is your God, so that people might hear? What remedy shall I apply to the ears of the people so that they should listen?" His works, Noah's Ark, page 35. May we all find peace in the remembrance of God and discover the internal happiness that comes with aligning our hearts and ourselves with our Creator. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to all of our esteemed panelists. We're now going to switch over to the question and answer session. And sorry, this. All right, so again, just a reminder, if somebody wants to ask a question, you can scan this QR code, and you can also go to this link to ask your questions. To start off the Q&A, it was noticed, and this is what one of the questioners mentioned, and I'm going to try to elaborate a bit as to what I think they're trying to get, what point they're trying to get across. You know, it seems that pursuing happiness, it's kind of like a long-term thing. And it's something that you have to sacrifice in the present to pursue happiness in the future. So the question is, does the pursuit of happiness sometimes prevent us from being happy in the moment? And that is to all the panelists. So if I can have, anybody can start, or we can start from all the way to the left, and then move on. For sure. Yeah, so, and also to the panelists, just try to keep in mind, we do have about, 47 minutes for the Q&A, so it's a decent amount of time, but just try to keep your answers brief so that we can get through the maximum number of questions. So like about 1 to 2 minutes would be ideal.
Can you repeat the question?
So the question is that, does the pursuit of happiness sometimes prevent us from being happy in the moment?
Yeah, so, happiness, as we understand, is being in the present moment and really living the moment to its fullest. And as I was saying, that when we are in the moment, when we are not regretting the past and we're not anxious about the future, and when we're here fully, that's when we really experience the depth of our being. We really are in touch with ourselves. And that's when we are experiencing the happiness. And how do we do that is by skillful use of breath and by bringing our mind into the present moment. So, pursuit of happiness is simplified by bringing ourselves into this moment and experiencing the fullness of this moment. And that is possible through the practice the practice of really modulating our mind and bringing ourselves into this moment, and by using skillful breath and different patterns of breath. Thank you.
So the question is, and I can elaborate as well if you would like, but the question that was asked, the exact word were, does the pursuit of happiness sometimes prevent us from being happy in the moment?
Sometimes.
Okay, I'll give you a theological kind of answer. Judaism is non-dualistic, which means that we don't believe, as I think some of my colleagues theologically would believe, that good and evil are kind of at war with one another. There's this concept that is non-dualistic. So it means that God has created good and evil. God is the creator of that. God is the Lord of everything that is pain and that is healing. And so the idea in Judaism that we would experience something that we have to not be, what was that? Can you restate exactly what it means?
Yeah, so the pursuit of happiness itself, can it deprive us from being happy in the moment?
Right. So from a Jewish perspective, the moment is all circular and all in and out. Because God, in Isaiah, it says God is the God of light and darkness, good and evil. And in our prayers, every single night we pray and we say that God is rolling light into darkness, day into night. And so every single day is this evolution of this. So from a Jewish perspective, I think that you're not giving over lack of happiness or giving over just suffering, that it's intermingled. It's not separated. It's not like good versus evil or pain versus coolness. You can find in that pain or that suffering fullness even in that moment. And also, for a short answer, I think in a practical way, yes. I mean, sometimes things are just hard. I like that's a theological answer. In reality, you're going to still live a moment of something that's difficult. And at what point does it turn? It does turn to something that's good.
All right, thank you. The mic's not live, so we can.
Christianity teaches that this life is transitory, that we're going through this life in hopes of attaining salvation in heaven. So that's where you get true happiness or bliss, which is beyond the pursuit of happiness. We'll do a talk on the pursuit of bliss next week. But that's something that Christianity focuses on. It always focuses on the next life, which is the eternal life. So if we're going to say, like the question again, you're going to have to repeat the question. Go ahead.
So the pursuit of happiness itself, does it deprive us of happiness in the moment?
Okay, so I said that about heaven and bliss, and then I'm going to agree with Steve on the sometimes part. Yes, there's going to be some good times in life, and there's going to be some bad times in life, and that's just life. Right? So I'm going to leave it at that. But maybe the Imam can illuminate this a little bit better. It's a little bit of a challenging question.
Thank you, so my perspective, and the Islamic perspective, is that this is a temporary world, a temporary life. And the example that I want to give you less than more theology, more to the practical way to respond. And I think that is something that would answer this question. If we go into the life of the founder of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, we see that on many occasions we see that suffering in his country. And then you also see him come out as a victorious person. But that suffering is very different, and that victory that you see in his life is very different than what we perceive in our fairy tales. And I'm sorry to use that word, because we're trained from a societal way to think about happiness as a prince goes and rescues a princess, and she lives happily ever after. It's just something that we're trained to. So one of the examples that I want to put before you is that
the Prophet of Islam, he was persecuted. Those who accepted him in the beginning when his mission started, they were slaves. They were people within the society who had no rights. He was fighting for their justice. And one of the main reasons that a lot of these individuals accepted him was because all of a sudden you have an individual who gets up, who is also from the chiefs of the tribes that were present in the area, is saying that you as a slave, or you as a weak member of society, now have rights. And because of that, he was persecuted. And that persecution lasted a very long 13 years, where his daughter, she saw death. Then you see that where his uncle, very dear uncle, he was an orphan, and his uncle brought him up. That was his family. They also died for that mission. Finally, after patience, struggle, he was instructed by God to migrate to Medina, from Mecca, where he was born, to Medina. When he's leaving the city, he says, and while looking at the city, he says, "O Mecca, you are my land, but your people will not allow me to stay here." And then he goes to Medina. And then there's an ordeal where he has to fight for the freedom of speech, freedom of justice, because it's not just Muslims that he's leading at this point. There's Jews, there's pagans, there's Muslims, there's atheists that are behind him, that are saying that we need you to be a statesman. You're a prophet to the Muslims, but we also need you to be a statesman. And in that, he tries to establish this justice where though the land he leaves, they try to keep attacking him. But keeping the whole story short, he finally becomes victorious. And on the day where he's victorious, he has 10,000 soldiers to his back. And there the Meccans, they see him right outside the city. And they say that, "What are you going to do with us today?" Because they knew that he had the power to kill them. And going back to the story where we see in these fairy tales that the king or the prince comes and rescues, or a general is victorious in a certain way, the Prophet Muhammad, he answers, and this is what true happiness is, I think. He says, "You will be done the same as Joseph from the Bible, Prophet Joseph, he did with his brethren. So I will forgive you just like Joseph, despite you killed my people, you persecuted me, you did wrong to my family, those who were weak in society. I will do exactly what happened in the Bible. What God instructed Joseph to do, God instructed me to do." So that was true happiness. So I think you have a sense of struggle, but in struggle there is also happiness, and the true happiness is found, as I mentioned, in God himself. So that is kind of the way I see it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll make a quick point. Just looking at the pursuit of happiness from the Sikh perspective is that we're in pursuit of being in that constant happiness, and that constant happiness, for us, even for me, I haven't achieved that, but we know that the gurus have achieved that, and Sikhs even I've heard stories 40 years back that even while they were going through suffering, even while they were going through torture, they were smiling through it. So for me, that's the hope, to get to that level of constant happiness, being in the midst of, suffering, but still smiling through it, still getting through it, and hearing those stories, and as far back as even 40 years ago, when Sikhs were going through a genocide in India, when there's stories of people being tortured, and actually while they were being tortured, they smiled through it, and it was actually disturbing, the police that was like torturing them. So for me, that gives some kind of perspective that state of bliss, that state of happiness is possible. And the way it's described in our scriptures is Doknai Sab Sukhi Hai, that there's no dukh, there's only sukh, there's only happiness there's no suffering at home. When you see Eki Eka Nita, when you see the one creator in everything. And Bura Nahi, there's nothing bad. Sab Bala hi hai, everything is happening because it's happening in His will. Even that torture, even that suffering, Har nahi sab jita, that everyone is victorious and no one is losing because everything is happening in the will of the Creator.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your responses. So there are over 31 questions, so there's no way we're going to get through everything, but I'll try my best to cover some of the general themes that are being brought up. But one of the themes that's being brought up is that a lot of the speakers mentioned that, we can achieve happiness by focusing on the happiness of others. And the question is that how can we balance the pursuit of personal happiness with the responsibility to contribute to the well-being of others?
So I think I mentioned in my speech about, well, I did mention it, sorry, I think. I actually did mention, John Rawls' veil of ignorance is a really good method for determining that. Basically, if you can design a system when you're on the other side of the veil and you don't know who you're going to be on the other side of the system, you make the rules and you make proclamations of what you would do, whether you're the person that something is happening to or you're the one doing the thing on the other side. I hope I'm making that clear. If anyone wants any more clarification on that, I can give it.
So everybody can feel free to answer on that as well.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question essentially is that a lot of people mentioned that, we should focus on others' happiness as a means of pursuing happiness of our personal self. But how do you balance the pursuit of personal happiness with the responsibility to contribute to others' happiness?
So, because in the Sikh perspective, we believe that the Creator is immersed within the creation, not separate, not a separate entity, and is actually within every single atom. We believe that personal happiness and the happiness of everyone is completely intertwined. And if you're not living in the service of others, you're actually not pursuing real happiness. So real happiness and that constant happiness, the constant remembrance, is also remembering the Creator within the creation. So it's actually not separate. And the moment you see the duality, the moment there is duality, that there is my happiness and there's others' happiness, that's where we're falling. So it's completely one happiness. Everyone's together.
Yeah, I would like to follow that because Judaism teaches something very similar. So Kabbalah teaches that essentially there's God, and God is the force of everything that exists. And human beings and life, everything that God has created, it's kind of like a rope. So if you can imagine a knot at an end of a rope, and then there are threads, billions of threads, which is the life of every single thing that exists that God has created in this world. And those threads are wound around one another, and then they're braided together in columns, and then they braided and braided on top of each other. But the threads also intersect, and ideally, as that intersection occurs throughout the rope, we all intersect at some point, all of our souls, because our souls are eternal. And so the idea is that if I'm intersecting with every single person in this room, at some point in the eternity of my soul's existence, that every single thing that happens to me can have an impact on every other soul in this room, and everything that if I say something terrible to John Capucci because I want to feel better about myself, and I try to make him feel less about himself. I will never do that to Dr. John Capucci. But if I were to do something like that, that actually in this soul intersection and in this God field, if you will, I'm actually diminishing myself. So there's really no duality. It goes back to that there's really no duality in this. We have to remember that in feeling happiness, we are elevating the happiness of the entire world, and that's kind of a Hasidic view as well in Judaism.
So I think we'll have Rakesh go ahead.
Yeah, so in Hinduism, seva is very important. Seva means service, but literally, if you translate it, it's made up of two syllables. Se and wa, meaning like him. So doing service as if you're doing it for the Almighty, for the Divine. So when we are out there doing something to benefit others, we do it in a way that we're doing it for the Divine. So seeing that Divine in others and experiencing that bliss and happiness when we're doing it for others, that is what Seva gives us. That is when true happiness comes, when we are offering it, whatever we're doing, as a service to the Divine. There's also sense of belongingness that actually helps us in doing more for others. If you take an example, a mom, even if she has 3 kids and now she has the 4th one, does she love her 4th child any less? Even though she may be, tired and she doesn't have time because she's busy in the household, she has a job or a career, but the 4th child comes in, she somehow finds the time, the energy, the resources to offer love equally to the 4th child. And that's because there's a sense of belonging. So when we have that sense of belonging, or when we develop that sense of belonging, and when we, because of that belongingness that extends to others, we offer that service or the seva, then we feel that experience. And our ability to offer that service increases when there is more sense of belonging. Now, how do we do that? That is when we drop the stresses in our life. And when we get rid of the stresses, sense of belongingness, which is inside us, that love that is inside comes to the fore, and that then translates into service, and that's when we experience happiness.
So I think that the pandemic, it taught us a lot, regardless of what background we were from. We believed in God, we didn't believe in God. The pandemic taught every single member of this society something. And I observed personally that youth from my community, they were sacrificing a lot. They were going out giving prescriptions to people that couldn't make it to the pharmacies. They were in shelters. And sometimes I would stop them and I would say, you need to balance yourself too and make sure that you're okay too. I understand that you're very passionate, but it's also important that you need to establish that within your life. Saying that Islam, when it speaks about balance, justice, happiness, all these subjects, it goes into a very basic principle where it says an individual or somebody who is a Muslim has 2 things that they must keep in mind. First is the Haqooqul Ibad and Haqooqullah, which is that you must take care, one of your responsibilities is that you must fulfill the rights of the creation of God, and then you can fulfill the rights of the creation of God. That's where you will find balance. So in that creation of God, an individual is also present as a whole being. So in order to serve, in order to worship, an individual has to be holistic, has to be balanced, has to be happy within his own life so that he can go and serve and worship God at the same time. So that's the approach that Islam takes. And I think this is something that we as Muslims, as members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we also are able to stop and understand those things, but what the principles of Islam are and the benefits that are found. So in order to serve, make others happy, fulfill the rights of God, as Islam says, Haqooqullah and Haqooqul, you must be a balanced person yourself. And there are various things, that this subject will go on very long, but there are many things that Islam promotes as an individual you should do for your own self, for your well-being, in order to serve others and serve the mission of God. Thank you.
So if anybody else would like to, panelists would like to go on that one? Okay, perfect. So I was wrong. Out of the 31 responses, there was a few requests for food being like hurried up.
You're after my own heart.
A few.
And we'll try our best to, mediate between those 2 needs
Balance.
and balance them.
Yeah.
But this next question is was specifically for the Abrahamic faiths, but I would also, if the other perspectives would like to comment, it's open for you as well. The question is essentially that some religions, or people may perceive this about some religions, that they believe that only the people that believe in their religions will attain salvation. I'll use the word salvation, I think, because it'll be more understandable. But then what about those people who don't believe in those religions? What would be their pursuit of happiness? And if they require more elaboration.
I think I know what that question, who is that question kind of for, a little bit. We're not going to name any names tonight. I can say that the Catholic Church is distinct, it has very much distanced itself from the idea that only through the Church you can achieve salvation. The Church has even gone so far as to say if someone was born in the middle of the Amazon forest and never knew or heard the word Christ, is that person going to be suffer damnation? The answer is no. We don't teach that anymore. We've distanced ourselves from that kind of thinking. And I have to say something else, is when you actually follow Jesus's teachings, and it doesn't matter what religion you are, or no religion at all, but if you are kind to those who are in need, if you feed the poor, clothe those who are naked or have no shelter, if you do those things, even without Christianity, that's also a way of achieving salvation as well. So you don't necessarily need to do that. I don't think that the other 5 panelists on here are going down under. And I'm not meaning to Australia, I mean somewhere else. I don't believe that at all. I never believed in something like that. Because I think that, in my opinion, and I might get excommunicated tomorrow morning, but we'll see, there are many paths to the top of that mountain. And to say that one religion has the greatest path, the best path, to me, is wrong. And I've noticed that Christianity has moved away from that. So I'll pass it on either to the other 2 Abrahamic representatives.
It doesn't, if you could go, and then I can go. Mine's quick. Mine's quick.
So not to diminish any faith or point towards anybody, but just for a better understanding, just like the Lord's Prayer in the Bible, we also in the Islamic faith have a prayer which is called the Mother of all prayers, which is, and I will translate it for you, which is Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. All praise belong to Allah, or God, who Master. All praise belong to God, Lord of all the worlds, who's the gracious, who's the merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment, and it goes on. So these basic principles that, or attributes that we identify of God, are Him being gracious, Him being merciful, Him being the Master of the Day of Judgment. So the basis that Islam requires for an individual to receive salvation is that he must adapt these attributes. He must be gracious, he must be merciful, and then we see that God is Master of the Day of Judgment, which the questioner is probably pointing towards that on the day when everybody will be asked, called to account, we recognize that He is the Master. So I don't have, as a Muslim, don't have the right, or I cannot take that right away from God, that certain person will be damned, and excuse my language, or certain person will be condemned, right? These are the basic attributes that an individual must have. And I'll quickly finish this by mentioning an incident from the life of the Prophet Muhammad. He has been quoted to say that there was a prostitute, and in Islam, or I think any religious belief, that would be something that is extremely permissible. She was a prostitute who saw a thirsty dog. She took her slipper and poured some water in that slipper to feed that dog with that water, so that the thirsty dog could no longer be thirsty. And she was forgiven by God. So our principle in Islam is He is the Master of the Day of Judgment. He gets to decide who He forgives and who He punishes. Nobody in this room or in this world has the right to condemn someone all the way to down under, as Dr. Pucci said. Thank you.
All right, mine will be pretty quick because Judaism doesn't believe that that if you don't believe in Judaism, you will go to hell. That's actually really not something that Judaism teaches. Something to be clear on is that Judaism is a tribal religion. And so what that means is that a Jew must be Jewish, and part of Judaism and being Jewish is the religion that goes along with that. If, as a rabbi, if someone comes to me and they call me up or they email me and they say, I want to be Jewish or I want to talk to you about conversion, I actually am supposed to discourage them a bit from doing that because they're taking on a life and a tribal identity that is really not the only pathway to God or necessary for a relationship with the divine. And so, yes, I love Judaism, and as a Jewish person, my faith is extremely important to me, and I do believe what the Psalms teach is that the Lord is my salvation. But it doesn't require someone to be Jewish to believe that God is their salvation. Any person in the world can believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we would consider them what we call a Noahide, which is someone who believes in our God. You don't have to be a Jew in order to do that. In fact, we don't think anyone is going to hell if they don't. You're just missing out on the joy of God, and from our perspective.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And Tremont, do you have a comment as well?
Yeah, so just to quickly give the Sikh perspective on this, for us, in the will of the Creator, in the grace of the Creator, the line in our very first chapter in Japji Sahib, a prayer that we do every morning is Hukmi Uttam Neej, Hukum Likh Dukh Sukh Paiya. So in Hukum, you get suffering and pain, but the next line is key. Ikna Hukmi Bakshish, Ik Hukmi Sada Pavaiya. That only some within the grace and within the will of the Creator, they get, they are put on the right path, and some people are left astray. But for Sikhs, because we believe in reincarnation, which is a little bit, not according to the Abrahamic faith, but we believe that we're not even in like when you get initiated into the Sikh faith, which is Amrit Chakana, or the initiation ceremony. The first question that's asked is, are you here on your own volition, or is someone forcing you to do this? So everything is by choice, and it's all in the will of the Creator. So if someone's not on the path, because we believe in this concept of reincarnation, for us it's not a worry, because we believe that the grace of the Creator and in the will of the Creator, people are given these gifts, and some people are not. So everything is happening according to the Creator's will and the Creator's grace.
So I'll quickly add, in the Hindu faith, there is similar to what my colleague here described in terms of non-duality. There is a belief that there's only one that exists. There is that one essence, that one energy, that one power that exists, and that takes different form and shapes and names. But that is that one entity that is there. That is there in you, that's there in me, that's there in other faiths. We may call it differently, we may look at them and pray differently, we may believe in different things, but at the end of the day, it is that one essence, that one energy that governs all of us. And that energy that governs the entire creation is without form and is without shape.
I just want to preface this by saying that it doesn't matter to me what you believe when it comes to theology. What I appreciate about everybody here on this panel here is that everyone is willing to get along and willing to, as Dr. John would say, follow Jesus' teachings. So whether Jesus was a real person or not, the teachings that he put forth in what could be seen as the gospel, he did have a lot of great attributes. The things that I don't really appreciate, and this is coming from a perspective of someone who gets a lot of flack for lack of belief, which is kind of a funny thing. But when you see how people have acted throughout the years, it kind of makes sense. And I have this funny story from my book, so you're going to get a preview of my book, where I was wearing a shirt, very provocative shirt, but also a very good shirt that I find, that says, "There is no hell, be kind anyway." Because that's basically my whole point. Okay? When you're on the outside looking in at all these different religions, the stories don't really make sense to me, and I'm not convinced by them. But it doesn't matter to me if that's how you want to express the way that you believe and the way that you want to treat other people. You get the good messages from your perspective and your faith, and that's awesome. I'm really glad that the people here, especially, right? These are very good representatives of the different faiths. But I have had people that were not such great representatives, and I had a handlebar mustache man come up to me and say, "I should punch you in the face for wearing that shirt." And I said, "Oh, why?" I said, "It's telling you to be kind." And he said, "Well, it's saying that there is no hell." And I said, "Well, what does the Bible say about hell?" "I don't know, I haven't read it."
All right, thanks, Steve. Maybe we should have Steve go first, because I'm sure all the religious perspectives are now like, "Man, I will respond." we don't want to turn this into a debate, but also in keeping with fairness, if somebody does want to comment, and we don't want to again drag this out too long, you're free. But I guess nobody wants to. We're good with that. Okay, perfect. You avoided that one. So the next question, there's also another theme that I've been seeing with the questions, which is that, speaking in theory, all of the perspectives kind of make sense. Like, yeah, you can attain happiness and this is the way. But what about when those difficult times actually hit and you are feeling that unhappiness? What do you do? Like, what are the actual strategies that you can use? And one of the people that asked the question also said, like, what if the people around you are the source of your unhappiness? Which I think that what they're alluding to is like something that's out of your control. And so maybe if everybody could give one strategy or a quick point as to what do you actually do when things get hard?
This is going to sound really funny coming from an atheist, but prayer does help. Prayer and meditation, because you're taking that time to have introspection. You're breathing slowly. You're regulating your what do they call that? Your rhythms, your breath, as the Imam was saying. And yeah, so that can definitely help. You can call it introspection, you can call it whatever, you can call it prayer, you can call it meditation, you can call it
meditation.
Prana, meditation, yeah. And yeah, it works.
Yes, for sure. Feel free to comment, guys. Just decide amongst yourselves.
So yeah, definitely, this is a great question, because the perfection that the Sikh perspective kind of gets to, it's really hard to reach that. And I realized this because 2 years ago, my grandpa passed away as well. And you know everything in terms of theory, what's supposed to happen, but when it hits all of a sudden, so the suffering is kind of, makes you human, right? So the idea is you're working towards that constant state of happiness, and it's not something you can force. And the concept that Dasam Badshah, the 10th king, actually says is that when you do the remembrance, or when you do the job, constant remembrance, there's a japa job, an automatic remembrance that doesn't take any effort. So within that automatic remembrance, then you're happy within the will of the Creator. And I'm not there. I have a long way to go. But the hope is the experience of Dasam Badshah, the 10th king, when he's fighting 40 against 1,000,000 in the battlefield, and he actually sends out his own son. I've never seen anything like this. And a poet in Punjab, Allah Yar Khan Yogi, actually writes this. Guru Gobind Singh, when he sees his son, dying in the battlefield, he says, because he's a warrior himself, he says, Shabaz Bisar, no sense of suffering, no sense of pain, because he realizes every gift is a gift from the Creator. And he's saying, Shabaz Bisar, bade khoob se lade ho, you fought, Shabaz Bisar, great job, my son, you fought so valiantly, kyon na Guru Gobind ke farzand jo bade ho. You're the eldest son of Guru Gobind Singh. So for us, it's getting to that level. It's really hard to get there because we're born as humans and we're going through that experience. But the hope is the people who have gone through that happiness and have, gone through it without any feeling. That's the pursuit for the Sikh perspective, is getting to that level where everything that's happening in the will of the Creator is sweet to us, and that's where loving everyone as well comes in, because that's our duty. And whether we have to take on the pain of the world to deliver that happiness, and what's amazing is the martyrdom anniversary of the 9th Guru, Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib, is coming up, who actually gave their life for the ability for a different faith to be able to practice their faith. So it's not even about, in the Sikh perspective, it's about taking on the suffering even for others, and it's not about ourselves. So that's the pursuit of happiness. Is we are going through a human experience, but we want to get to a level where we are one with the divine, and just the way divine is happy within His will, we're happy within it as well.
I want to be mindful that we are. We're talking about happiness, and there's mental illness, which is something outside of what I think we're talking about, because I don't want anyone to think that, at least from my perspective, and I think anyone here, that if someone is actually suffering from something like depression, that you could just pray it away or something like that. I want to say that because it would be really easy for people of clergy and people of faith to say, well, because they have historically said, well, if you're depressed, it must be a spiritual problem. And I don't believe that. So I want to make sure that I think everyone up here is probably clear about that. Assuming that we are not talking about that, and we're talking about regular life and difficulties in our life that cause us, every single day we have an up and down. I mean, like, someone cuts me off in traffic, and I've gone from like singing my favorite song on Spotify, blaring through my speakers in my car to I'm not gonna. Well, I wouldn't say that because I'm right. But I feel very strong feelings about something like that, right? So I can go from 1 second to extreme happiness and joy, and then suddenly I'm a little bit peed off. So like that can happen. I think that something that is really important to acknowledge with this from a spiritual perspective is something that I actually learned in the military, which is, when I was in the military, I went to boot camp. And I was going to become a lieutenant after this. I was an officer. But before I became an officer, I had to go to boot camp. I was in San Antonio, Texas, and it was July. That is brutal. And they do that on purpose, right? They want to make you as miserable as possible. And we would stand outside on a pavement pad, and we would just stand there in the sun for like an hour or two, and we couldn't move. And the sweat would be pouring down, and it's just terrible. And I learned that mental toughness is actually really, really important in life. And how do we get mentally tough? Why were they making us stand there for 2 hours? They would give us little 10-second breaks to drink water, and then we'd have to come back to attention and just stand there. And I learned I had practice to go into my mind and to go deep into the recesses of what was there, and to pass the time and to really reflect. And in a spiritual perspective, that's what we call spiritual practice. And so I don't know about you, but I knew there was going to be pizza tonight because there was pizza last year. So this morning when I got up, I actually had spinach and eggs, and I tried to eat well. And then at lunchtime, I had something healthy again. I had a salad because I was preparing because I knew I would have this food tonight, right? So our life is one of practice. We have to spiritually also eat our spinach and be doing the things and take care of our prayer life, because when we do that, we have a spiritual toughness. We have a mental toughness. And so then when someone cuts us off in traffic, or far worse, we have the ability often too, we want to jump on the thing, to pull back. And when we pull back, we can gain greater perspective, and it can actually help us really, really to react well and to feel much better in the moment.
So I just want to also just mention that this will be the last question.
Okay.
So and then after this will be.
So keep every answer to about 10 minutes.
Yes.
Can I quickly add? I won't take too much of time. One thing that is certain in life for everyone is that there'll be moments of happiness and pain and suffering, no matter what. You beautifully explained that. We go through the ups and downs in life. No one is exempt from that, right? So first is to really accept that all of us go through that. All of us has challenges. All of us have those ups and downs. When we are in that space of acceptance, when we're not fighting it, when we are saying that, this is it, then you find the resources inside to deal with it. Then you are in that state to say, okay, now let me see what I can do with the situation that I'm in. So acceptance is very important. The other thing is we have some amazing tools to then deal with it, which is observing what is happening to us, observing the mind, observing the emotions, observing the breath, observing the sensations in the body. When you do that, then you transcend the challenge that is affecting you, that is taking over your mind. And that situation then turns. The situation may remain the same, but your way you respond to that will change. You are much more settled. Your mind is settled. You're able to deal with it better. So accepting, observing, and then when you are in that state of observing, and when you're experiencing that stillness, you experience that tranquility, that equanimity, which will then help you in really dealing with that situation.
I'm going to jump off script actually and talk about a religion that's not represented on this panel today, but that they have a good interpretation of this question, and it's Buddhism. Those of you that know a little bit about Buddhism know that the Four Noble Truths. The first one is life is suffering, and I think that is something that we tend to forget, that we expect everything to be roses all the time, and unfortunately it's not going to be roses all the time. But the good news with the second noble truth, you're saying, did he just go from Christianity to Buddhism? Yeah, I did. Is that life is suffering, and suffering is caused by desire. So this is something we were talking about. Mr. Rakesh was talking about this early on about the toys. That you wanted these toys, and then later on in life you wanted different things. So I think that's an important point to remember as well, is the realization that not everything is going to work out, and that's okay. That's normal, that's acceptable. I find comfort in knowing that. And of course, what Steve said too about prayer and meditation, yes, that's also helpful in that process as well.
I'd like to start off first. I think I agree with the rabbi. She's mentioned a very important point. Mental health is a very serious issue. And of course, there's a spiritual aspect to it. But the very first thing when somebody breaks an arm or has an infection, we go to the doctor, right? And that's very important. There's a lot of stigmas behind that, especially relating to different cultures. They don't accept going to the doctor. They say that, I don't think it's more of a religious thing, it's a cultural thing where it's not acceptable to go to the doctor. Saying that, anything outside of that, I'm going to mention is that when I think of happiness, the first thing that comes to my mind, and this is a personal thing, and is my mother. The contentment and the relationship an individual has with his mother is of the two attributes I just mentioned to you. She's gracious to you, she's merciful to you. It's very unlikely that you'll find somebody like that. Again, of course, I'm a father myself. We try to be merciful and gracious to our kids, but the mother, the grace and mercy that a mother gives to her child, my opinion is nobody can give that to a child. And that's where our basis starts as being individuals. Of course, there's exceptional cases, but I'm talking about normally. And if in this world we have a beautiful thing such as a mother who gives us that grace and mercy or that attachment that we need to be happy human beings, then God Almighty also provides that. That's a living relationship that you have with your mother. God Almighty also, if He created us, in Islam, and I believe all religions would agree with me, God has created us. So if He has created us, He must have had created the means and the things that we need to be happy individuals. Right? That grace and mercy is there. And we see that in the lives of prophets. As I mentioned in my talk here, we see it in the life of Adam, we see it in the life of Noah, we see it in the life of Abraham, we see it in the life of Krishna. We also believe that Krishna was a prophet. We see it in the life of Muhammad, we see it in the life of Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we see it in the life of Jesus Christ. That they, despite hardships, despite having struggles within their lives, they had a living relationship with God. Just like an individual has a living relationship with his mother, prophets had living relationships with God Almighty. And in that living relationship, He was gracious and merciful. And we see them, despite atrocities and hardship, they were happy and whole individuals, and now we see as examples. So I think that's the thing. I personally, when I see happiness, I imagine my mother, and then in that I imagine a relationship with God, a living God who still speaks. When I'm in need of Him to speak to me, He still speaks. When I need a true dream, He still gives me those true dreams. Just like my mother would nourish me as a child, now God spiritually nourishes me. He speaks when He needs to speak. He shows me true dreams when I need. I feel that contentment when I'm in a problem with God, and God Almighty gives me that contentment, just like another one. And I think that's an example that we should put before us when we're in some type of hardship. That's it.
All right, thanks a lot to our panelists. It's been a grueling 2.5 hours. You've all done an amazing job. So now we'll be requesting.
Sorry, just one quick thing.
For sure.
Yeah. This is maybe something that you guys have considered, but just wanted to give an open suggestion if this is possible for next year to have the Indigenous perspective out as well. That would be really good if we can include that. So land acknowledgement is a great start, but if we can have the Indigenous perspective, I think we'll all be able to learn from that as well.
Sure. Thank you very much. Best wishes. So again, thanks again, and it's a great suggestion for sure. We will work on that. Now, the final item before we move on to food is I'll just be inviting President of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Students Association. His name is Ibrahim. He's done a fantastic job in leading us to successfully hold this event. So, Mr. President, take it away. I'll try to be brief. I know I'm competing with dinner, and that's always a losing battle. So I appreciate what the
Just mentioned, and we'll definitely try to incorporate more perspectives. It's always a challenge finding people, and with university, we're all full-time students. So he's definitely right, though. We will try to incorporate more perspectives, and if you guys know speakers that would be willing to talk from these extra perspectives that we don't have here, we'd be more than willing to reach out to them and try to get them on these events. So I'll start my remarks from now. I'd like to thank all of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Students Association. You guys see the end result, but the months of work that goes behind it in every stage can take us weeks to finalize things and get things approved and get things going. So I want to just thank all of Amsa. I also want to thank Majlis Qudam al-Ahmadiyya, which is our youth association here in Windsor. They're not really a part of the student body, but they've helped us a lot in organizing and arranging everything. So with that being said, if I can leave you with one message today, or one point of reflection I had from listening to all of these amazing and qualified people, especially Steve, is that we all experience hardships, but when we stop sourcing our happiness from within ourselves and looking towards other people as a source of happiness, or we all know that everyone is going through something right now. Some people have it a lot worse than others. So if you can just be there for someone, try to be there and help out in any way. If you guys ever need any of us, Amsa is always here. Our posters have all of our social media and everything, so you can follow as well. And if there were any shortcomings, I do apologize. We try our best, but there will always be shortcomings. So please do leave us your feedback. You can email me or anything, and we will work on those. So I appreciate you all for coming, and for the announcements for the food, I'm going to ask you guys to please be seated. The guests, the volunteers will call you up slowly, and I'd also like to request that we do have pizza, but it's only vegetarian. So if you are a vegetarian, the pizza will be in the back left corner, my back left. So he told me to promote his live stream that is on YouTube, which will. It's the event live stream. It's Amsa's live stream. It's our official live stream, so it'll be posted after. Yeah. So on the right side we'll have chicken biryani. So if you are not a vegetarian, you are requested to take the non-vegetarian food, even if you don't like it. I'm sure you'll love it. It's been made with a lot of love. I love it personally, and I'd never go for the Okay, I'm just making this worse. Yeah, but please, if the pizza is limited, so I'd request that only the vegetarians opt for that, and just wait. And I don't see it. Yep. So the volunteers are ready. Stay seated, and you'll be called up. Thank you, everyone.
So good to see you.